probably the best stand-up in the racket.
He's funny. Did I say that twice? Oh, good. Well, he is.
Here he is. Personal favorite of mine. This guy, among the new comedians, is young and gifted.
Very much. You look great. That's all we need, another bright new young comedian.
Good friend of mine, a wonderful comedian.
Please welcome my old buddy,
Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
Here he is, Mr. Tom Dreesen.
Tom Dreesen.
And to this day, people say, "Who's Tom Dreesen?" It was a great start. I know who Tom Dreesen is because I'm Tom Dreesen. And now I am going to tell you who is my co-host in a minute. But first of all, what we're going to do for you today is what we try to do for you every day. We're going to try to bring you a lot of laughter with funny stories. And then also wisdom through motivation. That's what we try to bring every show. And the reason I do this is because this young man sitting next to me, I've known since he was 10 years old. And he calls me Uncle Tom. And that's okay with me. But he's asked me 10 million questions in his lifetime to his ripe old age of 23, I think. 24, oh my God. He's an old man. My co-host, Joe Gold.
Hi. Thank you, Tom. And I always ask you, how are you?
Duh. I'm fine. I'm fine. Even when I'm not fine, I say I'm fine.
You always say you're fine.
I get up in the morning and I say something amazing is going to happen to me. Every day I get out of bed, and some days I don't feel like getting out of bed. But I say something amazing is going to happen to me today, and that gets me out of bed.
I like that. And this is what amazing is. This is the amazing thing that's happening today. How was your week? Anything happen this week? Anything?
I mean, same old stuff that I do. I tried out some new material at the Laugh Factory, and that went over real well.
Yeah.
And then at Flappers, I tried out some new material at another club called Flappers.
Yeah.
And that went over real well.
You've been in show business 56 years, and you're doing new material.
You know what motivated me one time? Years ago, I was touring with Sammy Davis. We were at Harris Hotel in Lake Tahoe, and George Burns, a comedian who was 95 years old at the time. He died at 100.
Wow.
But he was 95 years old. He was appearing at Caesars in Lake Tahoe. And I finished my show, and I went over. I had done the Dean Martin roast, and we roasted George Burns.
Yeah.
And I knew him, and I liked him a lot. I liked his manager.
Yeah.
And Irving Fine was his manager's name. But anyhow, I rushed over to see him, and George Burns was 95 years old. He didn't run out to the microphone when they introduced him, but he got out there, and he did an hour and 10 minutes of very funny stuff.
Wow.
After the show was over, I went backstage to say hello.
Yeah.
And as a lesson about that I'll tell you about later, why you always go backstage when you're watching, when one artist sees another artist.
Sure.
But anyhow, I went backstage to say hello, and George had some 3x5 cards, and he was looking at the cards like this, and I said, "Hi, George." He goes, "Oh, hi, Tommy." He said, "I was working on some new material tonight," and I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to be 95 years old working on new material.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, give yourself a lot of credit, too, because you've been in the business 56 years, so you at least have to be 56 years old, and you're doing a 90-minute show, right?
Yeah, I do a 90-minute show called The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh.
Yeah.
And it's stand-up comedy, but it's also storytelling. As I'm telling stories, pictures are coming on the screen, authenticating the stories, or video.
Yeah.
And it's a fun show for me to do about the 14 years I toured with Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
But quick thing about George Burns, he's 95 years old. At age 80, he was with a comedy team for years. His wife, Burns and Allen. Gracie, his wife, died. He wasn't getting much work at all. Jack Benny introduced him to Jack Benny's manager and said, "Try to get George some work, And so George was trying to get some little club dates for $1,500 or something like that. Oh. But Jack Benny was in a play called Sunshine Boys, and he got ill, and George replaced him at age 80. By age 82, George Burns is becoming a star. He also, a new star. He already was a star. Sure. But they put him in movies with John Denver, movies called Oh God, where he played God.
Wow.
And George Burns, now he's hotter than a firecracker.
Yeah.
And at 95 years old, Caesar's Palace offered him a 5-year contract at Caesar's.
No kidding.
And he turned him down. You know why? Huh. He said he wasn't sure Caesar's would be around in 5 years.
That's good. That's good.
But I mean, that attitude,
That's a great attitude, yeah. I want your take on a few things kind of that happened to me this week. First of all, do you notice anything different about me?
Let's see. You only have one ear.
No,
you have no ears.
I have no ears. I want your take on this. And there's not a lot of backstory I'm going to tell you about this, but I got my first spray tan.
Spray tan.
Yeah.
They actually wait a minute. You didn't go into a tanning booth.
I didn't go to a tanning booth. Let's just say I got I got an opportunity to get a spray tan, and I've never gotten one before. And after it was done, I don't know if I look. There's so much lights on me, but I don't know if I look tan right now. But afterwards, I thought I looked like a perfect like golden brown brownie or cookie right out of the oven.
Really?
And I wasn't really sold. But then it kind of settled in, and now I'm like, all right, I look like I just got off the beach of like Cancun or something. Have you ever gotten a spray tan? I want your take on this.
No, my take I'd be very. I hope you research it because I'd be frightened. I'd say, wait a minute, what chemicals are in this spray that you're doing?
Right.
Even the tanning booths, there
Right.
was a lot of controversy about the tanning booth.
Sure.
But I mean, I would be. I probably wouldn't do it. I'd be very skeptical.
And I did ask the ingredients in the solution, and the number one ingredient was beets.
Get out of here.
Like the food beets, because it is red, and if it's mixed with other things, which I don't really know what they were, I guess it turns like a brown, like a golden kind of brown thing.
Was it all organic?
It was all organic.
All organic.
And that was the thing. It was organic stuff. Yeah. So that's why I was more susceptible to do this.
Well, I mean, again, I would want to, like anything else, you read the can and you want to know what's in there, and is it? I would do a lot of research, like other people had it done, and what did they think of it and all that. But whatever floats your boat. It wasn't around in my day, that's for sure. You know how you got a tan? You went to in Chicago. We'd go to around the lake or something, but in those days they would take like some kind of oil to make you burn,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I never used suntan lotion ever in my life. I caddied for years, never used suntan lotion. They didn't have it in those days and stuff, but, I do it now. I play golf and I use suntan lotion all the time.
Well, that sounds awful.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. I want your take on another thing, too. So I started... I since I've been in this industry, I don't know why, but I have become a night owl. I've become a night owl and sleeping later because I'm learning that nobody in Hollywood wakes up till 9 a.m. for some reason. And I think that's a joke around Hollywood, but I'm becoming more of a night owl. And I know people say, if you wake up earlier, you get more stuff done, but I'm starting to think that's not really true.
That Benjamin Franklin, early to bed, early to rise,
Right.
makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. I am a night person. I couldn't help it. It's just my whole life, I seem to become alive more around 6 or 7 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I could function during the day, and I did in many cases. But when I got in the show business, it really lent to that, and especially when I start working in Vegas and stuff. We were doing 2 shows a night in Vegas. Now you're getting off stage at midnight. You didn't go jump in the sack.
Right.
You went somewhere and had something to eat.
Right.
Or in Las Vegas in those days,
Right.
when they had all the lounge acts. When I toured with Sammy Davis there. I toured with Smokey Robinson, Gladys Knight and the Pips, and Natalie Cole, Frank Sinatra. We would go to the lounge acts after our shows, after doing 2 shows a night. You'd hang around the lounges. So I became a night person.
Right.
And I would and just come awake like at like noon or something. I would sleep till 9 or 10, get up, wander around a bit. In those days I was a runner. I'd go run sometimes, and then I'd come back. But some people are just night people. Frank Sinatra never went to bed till the sun came up, ever. Whether we were on the road or off the road.
Wow.
He was nocturnal. He came alive, he'd catnap during the day all day long.
Yeah.
And then he would stay up till dawn.
Did his body, and you touring with him, you probably had to stay up with him, right?
Much to my dismay, I mean, I love the guy, and I love being around Frank Sinatra, and his, some of the people that we'd be with after the shows was always because the stories were just golden, the stories. But one of the times, hardest time I made him laugh. I always say it was fun hanging up with him till dawn. After about 10 years, it got a little bit tiring.
Yeah.
One night we were at the desert, and we'd done one-nighters all over the country, and we flew into Vegas to do. Work in Vegas for a week, and we work in the desert inn, and sure enough, after the last show, opening night, Frank, all the guys getting together, Frank, and there's about 4 or 5 of us guys, and around 4:30 in the morning, I'm beat. I get up from the table, and he said, "Where you going?" I said, I'm going to bed.
Where
He
you
said,
going?
Yeah, he said, where you going? I said, I'm going to bed. He said, what for? I said, because I got to get up early in the morning, go to the cemetery and visit those guys. He said, what guys? I said, all those guys who died hanging out with you every night. You know?
No kidding.
And he laughed.
He got a
laughed.
kick out of that?
Oh, he got a big kick. And he said, go to bed. And he'd make me tell that story sometimes. He'd tell him what you said that night
Yeah.
at the Desert Inn. You know.
Did he have such a? I got to give you this, or I'm going to keep messing with it. There. Did you? He had a good sense of humor, though, right?
Yeah, I mean, I a sense of humor by my humble definition
Sure.
of being a comedian 56 years, but a sense of humor is not when you have the ability to laugh at others' shortcomings or misfortunes.
Right.
It's when you have the ability to laugh at your own. You can laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
Good comedians will come out on stage and the first couple of jokes will be on them. A good public speaker, when he goes on stage, before he starts his speech, will tell about something dumb he did
Right.
or something that it shows that you're like them.
Right.
That sometimes you'll see an entertainer on stage, a beautiful woman or a guy, and they'll say, what have they got to complain about?
Yeah.
But when you do things like that, you let them know, I'm just like you. I hurt just like you, and I have
Right.
heartaches just like you. And
Yeah. I've never asked you this, and I know I've asked you, 10 million questions before, but when you first got around Frank, and I know you toured with him for 14, 15 years, when you first got around him, were you kind of comfortable around him, or was it more, I mean, this is Frank Sinatra, arguably the greatest entertainer of all time. Were you comfortable around that?
Not immediately, because you got to learn whoever you're touring with. And fortunately for me, when I met Frank Sinatra, I had toured with Sammy Davis for 3 years,
Sure.
Smokey Robinson, Mac Davis,
Yeah.
Tony Orlando and Don. I mean, all these people I toured with. So I had a real experience, and I'd done about 35 Tonight shows at that time. So I was in the business. But touring with Frank Sinatra was unlike any other tour you could ever be on.
Right.
We were doing, with Sammy, we'd do 2,500 people, 2,000 sometimes, or like that. But with Frank, it was 20,000 people in the arenas in the round.
Yeah.
And not proscenium where people in front of you, they were all around you. So it's a totally different dynamic for a comedian.
Yeah.
And so I was a little intimidated by that, and I knew I had to adjust to that and make it work. But also, when I was a little boy shining shoes in all the bars in Harvey, Illinois, Frank Sinatra was on all the jukeboxes. Yeah. In my day, if you said, I'll play a word association game with you. If you said, love, I'd say mom. If you said baseball, I'd say Cubs. If you said show business, I said Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., and Dean Martin.
Yeah.
That's who, to me, show business was.
And
it. Frank Sinatra was the epitome of that. And now I'm going to open for him.
Right.
But I picked up on something when I was a bartender for years. There are certain guys that I just picked up on personalities, what they were. Mm-hmm. And I picked up on Frank right away. He didn't want another fan.
Yeah.
He wanted a pal, a friend.
A buddy, yeah.
Yeah, and so at that time, when I met him, you know how many times I wanted to say to him, Frank, when I saw you in From Her to Eternity, where you won the Academy Award, or Frank, the song that I really love, I Have Dreamed, from The King and I, when you did that song. I wanted to say those things, but I never did.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra never knew how much in awe of him I was.
Yeah.
Because I never let him see that.
Right. Yeah.
And when I got along with him, I talked to him about the baseball or
sure.
Just other things other than show business sometimes.
Yeah, and I think a lot, because I have people in my life who are at a very high level, which a lot of people know them, and I try not to talk to them about whether it be their sport or their acting thing, and people come into the self-tape studio that I work at that are like, they have this one specific role that that made them for this. I never want to talk to them about that.
Explain to our listeners that job you have as an actor. You're working in a video shoot. Explain that.
So obviously, as actors nowadays, you can't just be an actor. You have to be, sometimes your own agent. You have to be an editor. You have to be a computer guy. So I work at a self-tape studio. And for those of you who do not know, everything that actors do nowadays via an audition is through a self-tape, meaning you have to do it on your own, whether it's through a phone, whether you do it with your friend at a place, which is like what I work at, a self-tape studio. So I'm a reader, a coach, an editor. So people will come in. They book either a 30-minute session, 60-minute session, or a 90-minute session. They'll read, we'll go over their audition, tape the audition, I'll edit them, and then send it to their agent, priest, rabbi, whatever they want. So I don't know where.
And to casting people, right?
And to casting people, and yeah, and I mean and I always say it's the best thing that's ever happened to me up to this point right now, because I'm doing scene work with all these great actors every single day, and I'm seeing what's out there, and I'm seeing, who's the different managers and agents that are getting all the stuff, and I'm seeing, who's writing this, who's directing this. So that's why I say it's the one of the greatest thing that's, happened to me today. But to digress, yeah, I try not to talk to those people who come in who are at this like super high level about their, craft or what they're known for, because I'm sure they talk about it all the time, right? And just like with Frank, I'm sure you don't want to talk about, oh, Frank, fly me to the moon is that right there,
Well, that's the difference between then and now.
Right.
When I'm an actor.
Sure.
I studied acting in Chicago and
Yeah.
L.A. and so and with different teachers and stuff. And I've done film and I've done sitcoms and Murder She Wrote and Columbo's and some.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you all my stuff.
Yeah.
Movies. Trouble with the Curve,
Sure, yeah.
Spaceballs. I still get checks for 19 cents and 28 cents from all those reruns.
Yes.
But in my day, when you had to read for a part, you'd go into a room where there'd be 3 people sitting at a desk. There's 20 guys outside in the lobby who are up for the same role you're up, and you'd come in and did you read the script? Yeah, okay. You'll be reading with our secretary here, Linda.
Yeah.
And now Linda's not an actress.
Right.
She's just a secretary.
Yeah.
And she's reading lines like, "Why are you holding that knife over my head, Jerry?"
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to kill you. You go over the top,
Right.
But anyhow, but your day today, this is how you get your stuff out. You go to one of those studios with the scene, and then you do lines with them.
Correct.
Which is great for them and great for you.
Yeah. And I always say, and my boss, who was a casting director, and he gave me one of the best pieces of advice, that these auditions now, they're not just auditions. These are screen tests, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes they don't even do callbacks anymore. They just go, which is a callback is basically a second round of an interview, right? So they don't even do callbacks anymore. They go audition, boom, you're booked, right? Because we've already seen what you can do on a screen for us in a high quality environment with a reader on the other side. So that's that's what I always keep in the back of my mind, that I need to nail this. I need to nail this. But I was fortunate enough when I was a kid, because I talked about this, that I was a kid actor. I was fortunate enough to be in those rooms, and I always loved it because I think half the time that I booked stuff, it was not because I was the greatest actor, but it was because they liked me. I was personable with them. And I've heard that a lot of people say that they don't have that connection. They don't have the phone. They don't have the tablets that they can, type on, that you actually had to say, "Hey, Tom, welcome in. Like, how you been? Blah, 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 blah." That's so funny. You said then versus now. I always usually come prepared with everything. So it's 2025, and I'm 24 years old. And I looked it up, and not to age you here, but in 1963, you were 24. Do you remember 1963? You do?
No, how could I forget?
I know, right?
I was married. I had kids. I
Right.
had spent 4 years in the military already.
Right. Meanwhile, I'm doing a podcast here with Tom Dreesen, and it's just funny because I want to play a little game here. So the federal minimum wage in 1963, so it's federal, so the entire country, right? It's $7.25 an hour right now. What do you think it was in 1963? The minimum wage.
$1.20.
$1.25.
Really?
Yeah. Wow, you're spot on.
Yeah.
A movie ticket.
By the way, we didn't rehearse this. I don't know where he's going with this.
No, right. A movie ticket, I don't know, where $11 to $16. It's like $33 out here in California.
Yeah.
What do you think it was in 1963?
A movie?
A movie ticket.
1963. I'd say might be 75 cents adult.
85 cents.
85. I would say, yeah.
And
again, we did not rehearse
yes,
this.
The price of gas per gallon averaged $3 to $4. What do you think it was in 1963?
I'm pretty sure.
I can't believe
I'm pretty sure it was 29 cents or something like that.
30 cents.
That way,
You're spot on with this. Oh my gosh.
I was very poor in those days.
Yeah, right. So you knew this one. Two of these boggle my mind. Where'd it go? Shoot. College tuition average today is roughly $19,000. How much do you think it was in 1963?
Now we're talking about different colleges, and
this is like an average, right?
I'd say
average. So average today is $19,000.
I'd probably say anywhere between $800 to $1,000.
$500.
$500. Wow.
$500 for college tuition. And my last one, and we'll move on here. The median home sale price today is between $390,000 and $420,000. What do you think it was back then?
13,000, somewhere around 12.
18,000.
18,000.
18,000. Wow, you were pretty spot on with that.
Well, I'm trying to picture. I didn't own a home in those days, but I was
Yeah.
trying to picture myself. Because we rented. When I came out of the Navy, one kid and then another kid, and
Yeah. 30 cents though for gas? That's
well,
insane.
all of that is relative. All
Right.
that's relative. All
Right.
of it's relative because it's just that today we're making a lot more money, and so they keep jacking up the prices and
Right.
stuff.
And go back to 1963 to now, and in our industry, in the acting industry, as well as it's all a lot of it is on social media. A lot of it is technology. How was it in 1963 starting? And I know we probably talked about this, but we'll revisit it in comedy or acting.
I didn't. I started in 1969. First time I ever went on stage was with Tim Reed.
Right.
We were America's first black and white comedy team. History
Right.
shows we were the last.
Yeah.
And there was never one since. But so it was a totally different thing.
Mm-hmm.
The different thing. But I want to go back to one thing. I can remember, honest to God, pulling into a gas station and buying like 30 cents worth of gas, buying 1 gallon.
Are you
Yeah.
serious?
Oh yeah. I remember times being so tough that I didn't. But I had just I'd only have some change and it was on empty, and I would get 30 cents worth. I most of the time I'd get $1. I'd put $1 in the tank. Rare did I ever fill the tank.
Right.
But I had the worst cars. I had cars where the muffler was dragging on the ground, sparks were flying up.
You remember your first car?
My first car was a '55 Pontiac.
Oh, really?
Yeah, in when I came out of the service, I got a 1955 Pontiac, and I think it cost me. I think the car cost $800.
Oh my
It was a used car, and and I can remember that car.
Yeah.
I remember my daughter Amy. I used
Yeah,
to
of
drive
course.
her around the car. I'd put her in the front seat of the car, and she had a little car,
Yeah.
steering wheel and everything. And
Yeah.
those are memories of
That's so great. And then I have in the media now, it's all TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, basically what we're going to put our podcast on to get exposure. But back then, I mean, newspaper was probably huge, right? Radio was probably huge.
No question about it. By the way, if you were an entertainer, in Chicago, there were like the Chicago Herald American, the
Sure.
Daily News, the Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times,
Yeah.
Chicago Today, and that's where you got all your information, and or on radio,
Right.
News and in those days you believed everything. I believed everything I read, and I believed everything I heard. I just thought, well, they know more than I do.
Right.
How naive I was.
Right.
How naive I was in those days. Yeah.
Right. And I always ask people this because now, when you go out with your buddies, like my 8 friends who visited during Halloween or whatever, when we go out and you have a few beers, you Uber home, right?
Mm-hmm.
You Uber home. How did you get home back in 1963?
You drove home drunk.
No kidding.
I did that many times. I'm ashamed to say that I did that many times. Once in a great while, I was a bartender also.
Yeah.
Once in a great while, if somebody had way too much to drink,
Yeah.
I'd ask one of the customers, can you take him home? But almost always, the driver would be belligerent. I can make it home. I can, and that's why DUIs were very common.
Oh, they were.
Driving under influence,
Yeah.
driving while intoxicated, DWI. They were very common, yeah, and you could lose your license over that after so many arrests.
But how else were you supposed to get home? You take a cab?
Well, that's one way. Leave your car here. We'll have your keys here, and you come back here in the morning. Once in a great while, people would do that, and you'd send them home in a cab. Or somebody from the tavern would follow them home and make sure they got home safe,
Right.
Yeah, Frank Sinatra used to tell a funny story that him and Dean Martin were doing a charity show at the Beverly Wilshire, and Frank always said, Dean at that time had a little red sports car, and so they had a few pops afterward,
Sure.
and they were going to Dean was going to give Frank a ride home. They both lived in Beverly Hills at that time.
Yeah.
So they get in the car and they don't go too far, and the spotlight behind them, woo, woo, woo. And when they pull Dean over, Frank said, whatever you do, don't talk to him so he smells your breath. Speak to the windshield.
Right.
Don't talk to the cops. Just talk, whatever he asks you, talk to the windshield. And Dean, Dean's a cool guy. Cop taps on the window, and Dean rolls the window down, and the cop puts a flashlight on him. and he puts a flashlight on Dean, and Dean starts singing, like, everybody loves somebody sometime.
No,
And Frank said, what are you doing? He said, he put the light on me. He said, I had to, he called him Deg. They called each other Deg, short for Dago. They called each other Deg. He said, he put the light on me, Deg. I had to sing a song,
Oh, my
Now,
gosh.
Frank said, we get out of the car, and the cop said to Dean, I want you to walk the line there.
Yeah.
And Dean said, oh, no, pal, not unless you put a net underneath that. He said, a guy could fall off that and get hurt, on the net,
They were funny. And so who was like just out of curiosity, who was the biggest, it's probably Frank Sinatra, but do you remember the biggest stars in 1963?
Well, movie stars in those days were movie stars. I mean,
Yeah.
today everybody's a movie star.
Right. Yeah, right.
Guy, today somebody gets on 2 episodes of a sitcom, and then they want a limo picking them up, and then
Right.
they want the red carpet everywhere they go.
Right.
Everybody's a star, but they were real stars in those days. Gregory Peck, Kirk Douglas,
Yeah.
Maureen O'Hara.
Yeah.
You can go on and on. Ingrid Bergman, and of course Frank was Frank. The movies that broke him out, was From Here to Eternity, where he won the Academy Award.
Right.
But the one thing people forget about Frank Sinatra, I always think about him as a singer, which he was. He did 61 movies. He won the Academy Award from Here to Eternity,
Yeah.
and never took an acting lesson.
Yeah.
One night I'm sitting with him in his compound in the backyard. All the women had gone to bed. He had all these house guests because he had all these bungalows, and they were named after his songs: New York, New York, Strangers in the Night, Tender Trap, My Way.
Oh, that's so cool.
And so
so
all
cool.
the house guests stayed at the compound in the bungalows, but all the women had gone to bed.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Clint Eastwood, it was Gregory Peck, it was Jack Lemmon, it was Kirk Douglas and Frank, and they were talking film. Robert Wagner, and they were talking film. And I was sitting back. These are people I saw in the movies when I was growing up.
Yeah.
I'm like a fly on the wall.
Right.
I just kept my mouth shut. I can't believe this conversation. I'm talking about directing and acting.
Yeah.
And I was acting in those days too.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in what these stars have to say about acting.
Right.
But I noticed they were showing great reverence to Frank. And these are top-notch actors. And finally I said to him, I was just curious because in Hollywood, everybody tells you who they studied with. I studied with Lee Strasberg, or I
Right.
studied with Stella Adler,
Right.
Stella Adler or whatever,
Yeah.
from New York. But so I was curious. I said, Frank, did you ever study acting? And Gregory Peck grabbed my arm real hard. He said, acting lessons would have ruined him. He was a diamond in the rough you don't fool with.
Wow.
That's from a learned actor, Gregory
Yeah,
Peck.
sure.
You think Frank was so... And again, won the Academy Award. But also, he danced with Gene Kelly in
Yeah.
2 or 3 movies where he danced with one of the greatest dancers ever in show business.
Yeah.
Gene taught him some steps, and Frank danced with him.
Yeah.
Frank was enormously talented.
Yeah. And these are all guys that you knew too.
Well, I got to know him through Frank, and it was and the wonderful thing about those stars, these were the biggest stars in Hollywood. You know what they wanted to talk to me when they talked to me? Then I said, Tommy, tell me about stand-up comedy. Whatever got you interested in being a stand-up comedian?
Really?
They were. Frank Sinatra used to say one night in Florida, we were working in Tampa, in Florida, and in between shows they had dinner backstage for about 12 people, and the governor and his wife and all this stuff. And Frank was at the other end table, and I was at one and he was at the other. And the woman said, Frank, how do you do that every night? How do you go out there and just sing in front of all them people? How do you do that every night? He said, he's got the toughest job in show business.
And he pointed at you.
Yeah, and I'm looking up, and I was new with him at that time. I look at, he said, stand-up comedy, that's the toughest job in show business. He said, I got the orchestra, I got this, I got that. He's out there all alone.
Wow.
And he had great respect for stand-up comedians,
And he gave you a lot of praise a lot of the time, didn't he?
Thank God, yeah. He was always real good to me. I got a lot of good reviews when I was touring with him, and that's pretty tough to get a good review when you're touring with this enormous star. But
Yeah.
and also what he liked was I kept changing my material because, first of all, I was doing all the Tonight shows. In those days, you had to come up with a new material every time you did the Tonight Show.
Right.
Johnny didn't want 2 guys going to bar jokes. He
Sure,
wanted
yeah.
original monologues.
Sure.
So I was in the habit of writing new material, and because we returned to the same cities sometimes the next year,
Yeah.
and he wanted his act to have fresh material and stuff like that. And he enjoyed my material. He would send in the wings when I was doing my show,
Yeah.
and sometimes, rarely would he comment on it,
Yeah.
but sometimes he would say something good about it.
Yeah. I know he probably had like a big team, but did he have a pretty small circle?
Yeah, he was real cautious of, people would always tell you he had an entourage. Frank Sinatra had just a few people around him. When we'd go to a city, they would give security there. He had a couple of in Chicago. He had 2 cops, Mike and Mike. Mike.
Not Mike Greenberg.
Mike Ricci and Mike. I'll think of the other Mike. Mike RICCI, and anyhow, we called them Mike and Mike.
All right.
They were 2 Chicago cops that when he'd come to town, they'd go off duty and they'd be with him.
Yeah.
And then in the East Coast, there was Bobby Palmero and Merrill Kellum were 2 cops that were Atlantic City cops, but they would go in soft clothes and be. But so he didn't have a real big entourage, but he was real leery of the press. You know, he didn't trust them.
Yeah.
He used to always tell me. He said, "Tommy, they're not your friends. They'll act like your friends, but then one day they'll cut your throat." You know.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh.
He said, "They're not your friends." He said, and it come to pass that happened to me. A guy I would never do stories. The guys would ask me for interviews when I first started training with Frank Sinatra. I said I wouldn't do interviews because I didn't want to do anything to hurt this gig because it was a great gig.
Right.
One time a guy talked me into it. He hung around a bar that I was going to, the Pineapple Hill Saloon in the Sherman Oaks. A nice guy.
Yeah.
And I said, "I'll give you the interview, but I'll say nothing negative about it." So all I did was say nice things about Frank Sinatra, what I thought of him as an artist, what I thought of him as a human being, how charitable he was, how good he was to his friends, all these things. But I was saying so many nice things, I just said, look, don't get me wrong, Frank Sinatra's not a saint, but he does some saintly things. Guess what the headline was?
That Frank ain't a saint or something?
Dreesen says Frank Sinatra's no saint.
Wow.
I did say that, but it was
Right.
out of context. I immediately, when I saw the newspaper, I drove down to Palm Springs.
Did you really?
Yeah, and I talked to. I told him what happened. I said, and I showed him the paper. He said, "I told you, Tommy, they're not your friends."
Wow. So was he was like an easy-going kind of guy, right? I mean, he understood, right?
He was not an easygoing kind of guy.
He wasn't?
Oh, Frank Sinatra could be temperamental. He could be.
Oh, no
He could
kidding.
be a sweetheart.
Yeah.
You know. But the thing, as a bartender, I used to watch my buddies, and you were a bartender too.
Yeah.
I used to watch my buddies when we drank. When I wasn't drinking, I was behind the bar. I couldn't drink. But I watched my buddies, and I would say they go through the 3 R's when they drink. After a couple of beers, they might become Rocky Marciano. They want to fight everybody in the place.
Yeah.
Or they might become Rudolph Valentino.
Yeah.
They want to every chick in the place.
Yeah, right.
Or they become Rip Van Winkle, and they just go to sleep. Alcohol affects everybody differently.
Sure, yeah.
We're all chemicals. Body's chemicals. You're pouring chemical in your body.
Yeah.
So everybody reacts to that chemical differently. Frank was Rocky Marciano.
Really?
A couple of drinks and you get argumentative.
Yeah.
The staff used to like me be around it because both my parents are heavy drinkers. I grew up around heavy drinkers.
Right.
I was a bartender. I myself drank heavy for years. Beer. All I drank was beer.
Sure.
But I've been around enough drunks and drinkers
Yeah.
that when I'd see Frank going off a little bit temperamental, I'd say, "Hey, tell me that story again about you and Dean when the car or whatever it was."
Yeah.
Yeah. And I could always get him change that subject around.
Gotcha.
And that's why the staff wanted me around sometimes.
Yeah. Is there an option for like Rodney Dangerfield? Does anybody become a comedian? It's pretty good though, right?
Yeah, very good.
That's so funny. I want more things about then and now. You know, technology. We have these smartphones and everything. Did you have cameras back in 1963?
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, we had them in the back of the covered wagon.
Yeah, right. You had to row here on a boat to get here. What about? And this is something that's big in our industry too. What about agents and managers? Now, would you say that the majority of your gigs came from agents and managers, or from you?
If I was not a stand-up comedian, I could have been a manager because I really knew how to. I sold life insurance before I became a comedian.
Yeah.
So I knew how to sell.
Yeah.
You know, I went to school for it in Columbus, Ohio, on sales and all that stuff, and I was real good at it. I was good at selling life insurance, and so I knew how to sell, and I knew how to get inside. I know how to conduct meetings and things like that from being in the JCs.
Yeah.
You know, I knew Robert's Rules of Order and all that stuff. But anyhow, I really got a lot of my work on my own. My first manager here, when I was at the comedy team, we had a couple of managers, Tim and I, through the years. But I was real good at getting gigs even for Tim and I. And Tim was a salesman too for E.I. DuPont, so we were both good at selling the act.
Yeah.
But then when I came out here, my first manager was Dan Wiley.
Yeah.
Dan was a wonderful, wonderful man. He's passed away now, God rest his soul. But I could find out where there was work, even acting jobs, and I would then turn Dan on it. Because the worst thing an artist can do is represent themselves in a negotiation or trying to get a gig. Because, the manager should handle that.
Yeah.
Because it cheapens your act and it cheapens your skills.
Yeah.
But I would hustle and find out what's going on, what this is going on, who was there before, how much they would pay, and I would turn it over to Dan.
Got it.
And I would say, Dan, and then Dan was real good at closing the deal.
Yeah.
But I have something on my desk that I've had there for years and years. If it is to be, it's up to me.
Yeah.
And truthfully, in show business, as you know,
Yeah.
it's really up to you. It's up to you to get out there and hustle, to stay in shape, to stay healthy, to don't be a drug addict, because it's in the end, it's going to destroy your talent.
I agree.
Yeah. That's my story.
Yeah, last thing on Then versus Now, just in this little category, I want to talk about girls. All right? Girls,
Gosh,
right?
one of my favorite occupations.
Yeah, right? So dating back then versus dating right now, I can't tell you how many people have met on there's dating apps. I don't know if you know about dating apps, right?
Yes, I do.
Right. So there's dating apps and so many other different avenues that there's people, start dating, by hitting them up on Instagram or whatever social media. What was the number one way you think that people back when you were, a free chicken, I guess, out there in the wild, what was the best way to meet girls?
Well, where I grew up at, there were 36 taverns, so I'm a street guy. I don't have a degree from academia. I got a doctorate from the streets. I grew up on the streets.
Right.
So you went to the corner tavern.
Right.
But the interesting thing about that is, there were a lot of bars where they were pickup bars. There was a lot of chicks who go to, a lot of young girls who go there and stuff like that. When I first came out of the service, not when I first came, when I was home on leave from the service, in Harvey.
Yeah.
But the way guys picked up girls in those days was like in the bar. You could go into a bar and there might be a woman down there, and you have a drink, and maybe you send a drink down there, and the bartender said, the guy down there wants to buy you a drink, and eventually you would wander over to a conversation.
Yeah.
And you'd get into a conversation. So where do you work? And are you from the neighborhood here?
Yeah.
But you're really trying to make a move on her.
Right.
But you don't jump all over that move right away because then you're out the door.
Yeah.
But so you conversation. You're from where? And where'd you go to school? And no kidding. And what is your nationality? Are you Italian? Or whatever it is. Irish. Or, you just keep conversations. And at some point in the evening, after you had a few drinks, you'd say to her, you got beautiful eyes.
Yeah. That's your move.
In that 1 second, she knows you're interested.
Right.
You
Ball's in your court now, right?
Said, and you don't say it out loud, real loud. You say, you have beautiful eyes.
Yeah.
And say, oh, thank you very much. But she now knows you care, you're interested. You made your move right there.
Right.
Here's the hardest part as years go by, and even now. Mm-hmm. You go to these places where there's all these young girls, and all the young guys are going there, and you can't hear yourself think. The music is so loud, and you say, what do you say to a girl? You got beautiful eyes. What? Your eyes? You got beautiful eyes. My thighs? No, your eyes. Your eye.
Right. Yeah.
You're out of hell with it.
Yeah.
I don't know how guys pick up girls today.
Yeah.
You tell me.
A lot of it is on. People. So you DM a lot. I know I keep saying that, but DM. So like a direct message through Instagram. People use pickup lines, right? Like another one, are you from Tennessee because you're the only 10 I see, kind of thing like that, right? Are you Jamaican because you're Jamaican me crazy? And these are very cheesy ones, but I
guess the girls in my neighborhood would say, bartender,
kick his ass,
get him out of here,
right? It's a lot through the apps, a lot through social media. I guess bars, but like you said, a lot of, people meet I think people meet in high school and college more nowadays too,
Yeah.
From friend groups. I know a lot of people who have dated through high school and are now getting married, and a lot of people who have dated in college, the majority who have dated in college, whether they, met at the local bar that they see each other at every weekend, and now they're ready to get married. So I think a lot of that is still in place. But I was always taught that you can't meet the girl's parents until you're really serious. I'm sorry, that's not what I was taught. That was the norm. I was taught, I mean, I'm raised old school Italian, as you know, that you got to meet the parents, open the door, pay for the first dinner, do the blah, 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 all the standard stuff. But I think the norm now is you don't meet the girl's parents until
She's pregnant.
Seriously, I swear to God, I know people who are getting married and they haven't met their parents.
Yeah.
They haven't met their parents.
Yeah. It's a totally different vibe today on that whole subject there. And when I grew up, where I grew up at, in the era I grew up in, if a girl got pregnant, you married her.
Yeah.
My mom, when I was 13 years old, my mom said to me, if you get a girl in trouble, you'll stand by her. That was what she said to me. I'm 13.
Yeah.
I'm going, Ma.
13.
I wanted to get a girl in trouble. I didn't know how.
Yeah, right.
But my mom, that was the mantra. And all of in the Irish community, the Italian community, the Jewish community, the African American community, if a girl got pregnant, you married her. Now, if they came to you, the parents came to you and said, and you weren't going to marry her, they said, you have to marry her. They'd say, no, I don't want to marry her. Well, then you have to pay for the child, because if you don't, we have to. There was no welfare in those days.
Yeah.
There was no, years later, and the war on poverty, well-intentioned but misinformed to me.
Yeah.
War on poverty, if at that time, and I'm paraphrasing a lot of this, but if a girl got pregnant and she wasn't going to get married, you could get, like, say, $250 a month from the government. If you got pregnant the second time from a totally different guy and he's not going to pay, you got $500 a month.
Yeah.
And supposedly they were going to pick this guy up, but they always got out of it. And if she had pregnant from 3 totally different men, maybe $750 a month, or whatever it was.
Wow.
So, what it did was it destroyed the family structure.
Right.
It totally destroyed the family structure in our society today, the war on poverty. Because, again, these guys didn't all go to jail when they were. In my day, you either paid child support or you went to jail.
Right.
They'd come and arrest you for that.
Oh,
but
wow.
all of a sudden, it destroyed the family. When I was growing up in Harvey, in 1960 area, let's just say 1960, there was like 4% of the children being born were being born without a father in the home.
Yeah.
Today, 72%.
Yeah.
3 out of every 10 white children born in America today have no father in the home. 4 or 5.5, some of Hispanic have no father in the home. 7 out of every 10 African American children born in America have no father in the home. There's 40 million children in America today have no father in the home. To grow up without a father in the home, they destroyed the family structure with that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't want to talk about that because it's political, but that's the truth. They break down the family structure, and that's one of the first things that will destroy a nation.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, we were more afraid of our fathers than we were of the police.
Yeah.
I'm serious. If there was a kid going through the neighborhood when I was growing up, in the Irish neighborhood, Italian neighborhood, and African American neighborhood, if there was a kid going around doing graffiti, snatching purses, the men of that community grabbed him and took him home and took him to his father.
Yeah.
You know what your son's doing?
Yeah.
And you were more afraid of your fathers. My black friend, Everett Nicholson, called him Gucci. He's in my act.
Oh,
and
Gucci,
everything.
yeah.
Gucci passed away, but Gucci, him and I were setting pins in a bowling alley one night. On the way home, the cop stopped us. It was late at night. And, hey, all right, what are you guys doing out so late? We were setting pins in a bowling alley, and we told them all. And they said, all right, we'll give you a ride home. And Gucci said, officer, please, officer. And Gucci was a tough guy, a tough kid. But he said, officer, please, if I pull up in front of the home in a squad car, my father's going to whip my tail up one side. Father, he said, officer, I promise you'll never see me on the street again. I promise you.
Yeah.
And he said, all right.
Yeah.
Because we were more afraid of our fathers than we were of the police.
Yeah.
But now there are no fathers in the home. It's not rocket science. All those murders on the south side of Chicago, all those gangbangers, I went back to Harvey. They named a street after me. While I was there, a young gangbanger came up to me. I was signing some autographs, and I knew he was trying to tease me, but I'm a street guy.
Yeah.
He was trying not tease me. He was trying to, sell wolf tickets to me.
Yeah.
Hey man, I don't know anything about you. They named a street after you. What'd you do? Whatever you do, you didn't do nothing. I don't know who you are. I said, never mind who I am. Who are you? Well, and he told me his name. And I said, yeah, well, we're talking. I said, what do you do? I don't do nothing, man. Do what I want to do. That's what I do. I said, him. And he said something about children. I said, you have children? I got 4 babies, man, from 4 different women. I said, do you spend time with your children? You spend some time? This is what he said to me. When I want to bang the mama. In my day, Gucci's father would have grabbed him by the ear and took him home and said, you know what your son said? That just didn't exist. But that's the kind of, and it's, it's destroyed the families in America.
Yeah, and that old school value that, I feel like we should probably bring back. There's a great song by Will Smith. It's called "Just the Two of Us." My dad showed it to me when I was a kid, and it's got old school values, and it shows, pull out chairs and whatever. So yeah,
Well,
give that song a listen if you haven't listened to it.
that's a great idea. And that's where I'm old school. Frank Sinatra. I tell this story all the time. When I first started touring with him, there'd be like 10 people at a table, women and men, eating dinner in one of the hotels or somewhere, and he'd be talking to you, and out of the corner of his eye, he'd see a woman get up to go, like they go to the ladies' room.
Yeah.
He would rise out of his chair.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's old school. And now he'd keep talking to you, and you sit back down. When she returned, he'd rise out of his chair till she was seated.
Wow.
That's old school. He had old school manners,
That's really old school.
Yeah. Oh,
Good
yeah.
for him.
You open the car door when you're first dating. You go to the door. You walk her to the door.
Yeah, of
And
course.
you don't expect sex on the first date,
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. No,
as everybody does.
bring those back. Well, we talked about then and now. We're gonna wrap it up a little bit. Do you want to finish? Do you want to say anything?
I always like, as we promised, we're going to tell funny stories, and I'm going to give you some wisdom if I can, and also some motivation, because as we say all the time, I give motivation talks on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. But I've reached all the goals that I wanted to achieve in life. I've accomplished some. I've fallen short sometimes in life. I've been knocked down a lot. In the book that I wrote, Still Standing, I talk about that, about getting knocked down physically and also in the business that I'm in. I wanted to be a comedian more than anything in the world, and so I practice all this self-talk to myself.
Yeah.
And I read all the books on positive mental attitude. But most people say, Tom, I want to do this, but it's just I'm scared to death. I'm just scared to try it. Whether it's public speaking or or stopping one job and going to another. If your dreams do not scare you, then they're not big enough. If your dreams don't scare you, then they're not big enough. Dreams should scare you. And courage is a resistance to fear. That's what courage is. It's a resistance to fear. It's the mastery of fear. It's not the absence of fear.
Yeah.
So fear is there.
Yeah, that goes along. I think we talked about just being uncomfortable, and they're not right. Wow, that's a good line. I've never heard of that before.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Well, it's. I read a lot of books on the powers of the, way back in the day,
Yeah.
the powers of the mind, the power of your subconscious mind, by Joseph Murphy,
Yeah.
all the Norman Vincent Peale books. But then you have to apply them in life.
Yeah.
It's not enough to know about them, then apply them. But to say you're not afraid, of course you're afraid.
Right.
To say that this is a big jump in my life and it scares the hell out of me, of course it scares you.
Yeah.
And if your dream doesn't scare you, it's not big enough.
Yeah.
It's got to scare you a little bit.
Right.
But then, and you say, well, I'm afraid. Of course you're afraid. Yeah, but courage isn't, it's learning to live with fear.
Yeah.
And I'll close with this. I think I told you this many times. I was on a plane one time. I was on a TV show with 2 women that wrote a book about healing the child within. And they had a card, a little card that you put your thumb on. It was like a little plastic card. And you put your thumb on it, and if it was green, you were perfectly calm. If it was red, you were very tense when you took your thumb off. If it was black, you were just terrible. You were really frightened.
Yeah.
And we got the card on the show. We all did for fun. I have in my pocket. The pilot that night we're landing in Denver. Terrible storm hit Denver. They almost sent us back. We were the last plane to land in Denver. Snowstorm hit. We stayed out on the runway for 6 hours with snow and terrible. And ended up staying in Denver for 2 days before I got home.
Wow.
Worst blizzard they had in a long time. Anyhow, the flight attendant comes up to me and said, the pilot is a big fan of yours. He recognized you, and he's a fan of Frank Sinatra. He wants to know if he can talk to you. We're sitting out there for hours. I go in the cockpit. He had his feet up on the sort of
dash,
dashboard.
yeah.
He had cowboy boots on. I remember that. And he was, and the co-pilot was sitting next to him. And, we're talking and talking and talking. And I had this card. He said, what's that? And I showed him. I said, show him. And he pressed it. It was perfectly green.
Was
Perfectly
it really?
green, yeah, calm.
Wow.
He said, let him do it. The co-pilot gave it to him. It was coal black. He said, he landed this baby.
Wow.
He said it was his turn to land it, part of the thing. It was his turn. He landed in that blizzard, in that snowstorm.
Wow.
So my point is, the pilot who lands a 747 every day, you think he comes down whistling Dixie?
Yeah.
Got 285 passengers on there. He gets a little tense, but he's learned to work on those conditions.
Yeah.
Same way with all of you out there. You learn to work with that fear.
Yeah.
You know, you get the job done. Even are you fearful? Yeah, but you get the job done. Each time you do it, you get better at it. You know?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate all the motivation, Tom. Well, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify Podcast. And we'll see you next time.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.